Next on this list is a game that is yet another North American PlayStation game based on a PC game. This time it's an RTS, and was the first North American game that utilized the PlayStation mouse, and that's game number 18, XCOM UFO Defense, which is called in the US. While the rest of the world was called XCOM Enemy Unknown. Why change the title? No idea whatsoever. Published by Microprose and developed by also Microprose and Mythos Games. The story takes place in the year 1999 when the world is being attacked by aliens and are planning to dominate Earth, but the world's powerful leaders are not going to let that happen. So most of the countries joined forces and you built your own armada, base, research facilities, and more, but also equipped with soldiers, pilots, engineers, and scientists as well. Once you're all set up and ready to go, you face off the alien army and reclaim your planet Earth. The world depends on you. Its development history all started back in the late 80s when they formed a gaming company called Mythos Games in 1988 by founder Julian Gallup and his brother Nick Gallup. Their first few games they made are Rebelstar 2, Laser Squad, and Lords of Chaos, until they started making a new game somewhere in the early 90s. Originally, it was supposed to be a sequel to their 1988 science fiction tactical game Laser Squad, but with much neater graphics, using an isometric style very similar to Bullfrog Productions' Populous. The initial 1991 demo presented a relatively simple two-player tactical game, which ran on the Atari ST. The Gallup brothers approached three video game publishers, Chrysalis, Doommark, and Microprose. All of them were trying to make a deal of who would publish the game. Eventually, the deal breaker was Microprose. Julian Gallup was very happy because he greatly respected Microprose and believed it was probably the best video game company in the world at the time. Although supportive of the project, the publisher expressed concerns that the demo lacked a grand scale in keeping with Microprose's hit strategy game Civilization. The Civilopedia feature of Civilization also inspired an additional on the in-game encyclopedia called UFOpedia. All that and the UFO theme was suggested by Microprose UK head of development Pete Morland. Julian Gallup's personal inspirations included several traditional games, in particular the board war game Sniper, and the tabletop role-playing game Traveler. Under Microprose direction and working at its shipping Soundbury studio, Julian Gallup said that while the research and technology tree somewhat emulates the role of advances in civilization, so he changed the setting to a modern-day Earth and expanded the strategy elements, among them the ability to capture and reproduce alien technology. He has cited the 1970s British television series UFO as one of the influences for the game's storyline. In particular, an idea of an international counter-UFO organization and the psionic powers of some alien races. A book by Bob Lazar, where he describes his support work with recovered UFOs at Area 51, inspired the concept to reverse engineer capture alien technology. Timothy Good's 1991 book Alien Liaison provided inspiration for several of Julian Gallup's revisions, such as the notion that the world governments might seize alien technology or secretly conspire with the invaders, a negative result which can occur in the game. Also inspirations included Whitley Strieber's book Communication and other weird American stories. Microprose UK graphics artists John Wrights and Martin Smiley provide what Microprose described as popular manga look and feel visuals. Julian Gollop credited Wrights with a distinctive comic book style and Smiley with a very detailed environment graphics. John Broomhall composed the music while Andrew Parton handled the sound effects. There were also major contributors who were not acknowledged in the game's credits, such as designer Steve Hand, a Laser Squad fan who helped the project get signed in, put input into the big game concept, actually came up with the name XCOM, derived from Mike Brunton's initial idea of XCon, where con originally stood for contact, and helped to define the comic book-like art style. Hand thought the original design document was poorly written, especially regarding the initial, more interactive and action-oriented UFO interception system. Nevertheless, the final game turned out to be very close to it. Certain creature types deemed boring were removed during development, as were the Men in Black, who were unused due to the perceived conflict with Microprose's abortive project to make an MIB-themed standalone game. A public demo of the game was released under the North American's version working title XCOM Terrain Defense Force. Despite numerous changes from the first demo, the tactical part of the game remains true to the turn-based layout of Laser Squad and the Gollop's brothers' earlier Rebelstar series. The AI system of those games formed the basis for enemy tactics, with Julian Gollop's programming his own unique algorithms for pathfinding and behavior. In particular, the aliens were purposely given an element of unpredictability in their actions. It was the first game programmed by them for the PC. In retrospect, Julian thought he would have concentrated on game design and left all of the programming work to Nick. Producer Tim Roberts was described by him positively as very laid back, and for most of the time allowed them to work on the game without any interferences and schedules, only checking in once in a month to conduct meetings in a pub. The original contract was for the game to be completed within 18 months. In the course of its development, the game was nearly cancelled twice. In the first instance due to the company's financial difficulties, and the second time under the pressure from Spectrum Holobyte after it had acquired Bill Steely's shares in Microprose in 1993. Julian Gollop said the quality assured team Andrew Luckett, Phil McDonnell, and Jason Thompson helped save the game from cancellation. Their feedback also helped to polish the game. The game was in fact officially ordered to be cancelled by Spectrum Holobyte, but Microprose UK bosses Pete Moreland, Adrian Parr, and Paul Hibbert held a meeting and decided to ignore it and simply not inform Gollop about any of that. Thus, the development team continued their work without any knowledge of the parent company's executives, until it was eventually completed in March 1994, after 30 months in development since the initial contract. During the final 3 months, after Spectrum Holobyte was eventually informed of the game still being in production, the Gollop brothers were forced to work 7/12 in order to finish it before the end of the fiscal year. The overall development of the PC version cost $115,000. Converted to the US, the total amount would be $146,390.52. Never thought making a game for the PC would be that expensive, don't you think? When it was released originally for MS-DOS in March 1994 in Europe and Australia, and mid-1994 in North America, it was a commercial success and gotten positive reviews, selling more than 600,000 units on the PC-DOS platform. Half of the game's net sales were in the United States, a rarity for a European title at the time. Gallup has attributed the game's North American success to its title XCOM, as the television series The X-Files had premiered a year earlier. So basically the reason why it was a hit in North America because they think that it was based on a popular TV show, The X-Files, even though they have no connection to each other, outside having the letter X on their titles. That's kind of funny if you think about it. Back to topic, more than 400,000 units were sold at full price, with little marketing from its publisher. Together with its sequel, XCOM Terror from the Deep, its sales had passed 1 million copies by March 1997. The game earned the Gallup brothers just over 1 million grand in royalties. The game also became popular in Russia, even as there were no royalties from that market as it was only distributed via software piracy. Overall, in retrospect, it was one of the best-selling games and had a big influence on project director Tim Kaine and the development team of the role-playing video game Fallout. The game was ranked the 22nd in 1996 and 3rd in 2001 as Best Computer Game of All Time by Computer Gaming World. And there was even two novelizations. One was XCOM UFO Defense, a novel by Diane Duane in 1995, and the other one was Enemy Unknown by Vladimir Vasilyev in 1997, but was written in Russian only because it was only released in Russia. However, the one by Diane Duane gave it negative reviews and said it is hampered by a poor understanding of the game, a lack of focus, emotional resonance and tension, and an unstructured plot, according to Rock Paper Shotgun. This would lead to more computer ports like the Amiga in early 1994 and Microsoft Windows in 1998, and surprisingly, only 2 home console ports like the Amiga CD32, which was only released in Europe and Canada, and the only home console version that we got in North America, the PlayStation. The PS1 port did retain the original graphics due to the time restraints, adding only some 3D models as illustrations for the UFO-pedia, but features much higher quality music than the PC version, with 55 minutes of CD quality tracks and 8 minutes of 16-bit tracks instead of the 8-bit MIDI music. The new music was composed by Alistair Brimble, who would later also create the first music for the first sequel, XCOM Terror from the Deep. It is compatible with the highly recommended and the first North American game for the console, the PlayStation Mouse, and requires 5 PlayStation memory card blocks for a Battlescape-saved game, which I called yikes on that one. When the PlayStation port was released in North America in October 25th, 1995, Europe in November 30th, 1995, and Japan in July 31st, 1997, it received as much positive reviews, but not as much to the original MS-DOS version. Electronic Gaming Monthly stated of the PlayStation version that any person who likes strategy games will fall in love with this title, if you could afford to buy one game for the PS over the next year. XCOM would be it. It has it all and then some. But a reviewer for Next Generation criticized the PlayStation version for being a little more than a straight port, arguing that the game could have been improved if the console's capabilities were used. However, he praised the game itself for its sophisticated, enjoyable gameplay and concluded XCOM was a smashing PC title. It's lost nothing of particular value in the translation and makes a marvelous addition to the console market. And finally, GamePro disagreed and said you have to be a major sim freak to enjoy XCOM. It's an interesting and complex game about planet colonizing, but the extent manuals and one-dimensional music really bore you to alien tears after a while. Despite some positive reviews along with some criticism, did the PS1 port age well like the MS-DOS version? Let's find out and review it. The graphics are good, at least for the 2D sections. The 3D section, which is just the planet Earth, is a bit iffy, but we'll give it a pass because it is the only 3D part of the game, but also was in the original PC version, unlike the previous game, Theme Park, that tried to add in 3D for the PlayStation as a first-person view, but end up as a blocky mess of outdated graphics. I know, off topic, but I still can't get over it. The presentation is great, which at the time was impressive and a very cool art style. The hubs in the right, like building a base, option menu, fundings, etc., does show off a lot of things carried over to the PC port. It also includes cool picture art in the background when you select a menu, and you can speed time by pressing these buttons if you just want to fight off the aliens fast. And finally, the menu section is alright for setting up your soldiers by picking a weapon you need for a tactical combat with the aliens, and that's pretty much it. There is more, but it will take too long, so moving on. The music is okay. There are some songs that I liked, but there are some songs that not bad but a bit boring, at least to my option. If you like the soundtrack, it's completely fine by me. And finally, the gameplay. The controls are a bit slow to get used to. If you're using a controller, of course, but with a mouse, no problem at all. Like I said before, this is the first North American game for the system to use the PlayStation mouse. In my opinion, a perfect way to play the game. Sure, you could still play with a controller, but why would you ever want to use this for an RTS game? The mouse is better and that's it, no competition. Now, with that said, I actually had a hard time playing it at first, since I've never played an RTS game before in my life until now. That is, until I figured it out like an hour and a half later. So I know how the game plays out to be. You go look for a UFO first, chase it around, after that aliens will invade a city, thus send your troops to that area. Then equip them with a weapon or armor. Then you enter the arena and try to kill off the aliens by taking turns of who shoots first. If all aliens have been killed in the area, then you enter back to the base and celebrate your victory. After that, you go and find another UFO. Rinse and repeat. Although they do something different once in a while, but I never got this far. Due that I have no time being the game and have other games to history/review, and to be honest, I only played like 2.5 hours of it, but still got the legit of the game, because like I said before, I haven't played an RTS game. Now let's go on to the conclusion. The PS1 port of the game is actually good. Even though it's an inferior port and not the best version to the original MS-DOS port, it still has some fun factor to it thanks to the mouse. I know they don't usually fit in together due that RTS games needs to be played with a mouse and keyboard if optional, and trying to port to home consoles is usually a bad thing due to inferior hardware. But luckily, that isn't the case for this game. Outside of the 3D Earth lagging whenever you move it with the right mouse click, everything has been brought in nicely and doesn't lag at all during the combat arenas. It's safe to say that overall, it's a good port. Now, after the release of the game, the series did make 5 more games, like Terror from the Deep, which also got a PS1 port, but I'm not going to review it because it was only exclusive to Europe and other PAL regions only, Apocalypse, Interceptor, First Alien Invasion, and Enforcer. There are also 2 games planned during the original series, which is Genesis, not related to the Sega Genesis, and Alliances, which a chunk of a gameplay was shown during E3 1999, but both of them were cancelled due to Microprose going bankrupt and closed down their studio in 2003, but did saw a brand revival of the company in 2019. As for the XCOM series, we did not see a new game since 2001 and was dormant for a while, until 11 years later, the series returned as a reboot called XCOM Enemy Unknown in 2012 by Firaxis Games, which received critically acclaimed at the time and made more, like Enemy Within, XCOM 2, War of the Chosen, The Bureau, XCOM Declassified, and the recent entry to the series, Chimera Squad. So the series is still going strong till this day. So as for the original, great game, but the PlayStation port, not great, but still good as its own. If it was a 3 out of 6, then it would be okay, but thanks to the inclusion of being compatible with the PlayStation mouse, I give my official rating a 4 out of 6. Next time on the PlayStation Years, we'll be taking a look at a game that is the first North American game to use more than one disc, and was made by a British gaming studio, Psygnosis, which just like Namco, had a huge role for the PlayStation. What is that game? Well, I'll tell you in the next review. Thanks for watching. Oh, and one last thing. Happy 25th anniversary to the PlayStation if you live in Europe or Australia. And that's about it. Bye.